Good morning. As Ms. Janice Beatty said, I am Saundra Anderson, and I'm a reverend and an elder here at Cornerstone Christian Fellowship. And as I started thinking about my introduction and my identity, it made me think of when I first got here and my choice to identify as Saundra. It wasn't even purposely, and what I mean by identify as Saundra, it's all my life I've been called Monique, which is my middle name. And for me, it was a choice in that moment to say, who do I want to be to this group of people? And I said Saundra. Because honestly, Saundra meant, for me, a reminder every time I heard that name that whoever is calling me that does not know me, or that it's not a safe place for you to know me. So it's interesting that was what I thought this place would be as well. Just another place where someone didn't know me or where I had to hide my identity. And that shifted. But do you know that the way you identify affects the choices you make, even down to how you act? Like I said, depending on what you call me dictated to me the aspect in which you would even engage with me. Whether you call somebody mother or daughter or son or friend, you become different aspects of whatever somebody's calling you. So identity is important. So much so for me that if you were in Alabama, where I'm from, nobody is gonna call me Saundra. And it was, Monique is embedded so deeply in me. I can recall my graduation, my auntie said, baby, your name ain't even on the list. And I said, you do know that Monique is not my real name. Like, even my family didn't know that my name was Saundra. That's just how less I even used that name. But I was home a couple weeks ago, and I did notice that my father always, when he calls me, he says, Saundra Anderson. My first and last name, or he'll say Saundra. No matter what anybody else calls me, when my father calls me, he says, Saundra Anderson. And it struck something in me that it doesn't matter what anybody else calls you. It doesn't even matter what you call yourself. The only one who has the right and the privilege to give you your name is the one who gave you life. Your parents can name you, but only God, your heavenly Father, who created you, has the authority to identify you. Your parents may have birthed you and named you, but only God knew you before you were even created in your mother's womb. So when you ask yourself, who am I? Who better to seek these answers from than your Creator? It takes faith in believing that the God who created you will help you understand who you are. Only your Creator can tell you why He created you. Until you know who God says you are, you will forever have an identity crisis and continue to make choices based on who you think you are rather than who you really are. I came today to speak a word of identity over you, to remind you of who you are. I want you to know that it doesn't matter what people have called you or what you've even called yourself. There is only one who has the right and authority to tell you who you are. Circumstances may have made things difficult for you, but they aren't powerful enough to define you. Your history may have marked you, but is not authorized to label you. It doesn't matter what people say about you or what people did to you. It may have hurt you, and it may take years to heal from that hurt that's deeply rooted in you. But it doesn't have the power to shape the totality of who it is you are called to be. You are not defined by your past. You are not defined by your behaviors or your failures or your struggles, not even your feelings of your circumstances. You are who God says you are. Your Father in heaven has given you a name. He has chosen you, adopted, and qualified you. You are not a mistake or an afterthought. You have been created in the very image of God. That means every aspect of your physicality. It means the skin you're in, the texture of your hair, the structure of your body, and even everything about you is made in the image of God. So anybody that doesn't like something about you is denying the very God in you. You are an expression of the creative genius of God. Even down to your personality is a unique expression of God. If you are introverted or an extrovert, it is not by choice. It's not by chance that that's you. Even your weaknesses is not a liability to God. It becomes a platform for the strength of God to be displayed in your life. The issue of identity is so important because the enemy wants so much to twist the image of who God created you to be, that you would either live up to or down to whatever it is that you believe is true about you. We see God changes names in the Bible, and even in those name changes, shifts the identity and who that person becomes in their destiny. When God meets with one person and reworks their view of their identity, it's the hinge that changes the course of a life. Today, I want you to journey with me on how a defining moment in time changed the course of a man's life. Today, I want you to understand your identity that can only be revealed in faith and having a God and believing in a God that created you. As you know, we are journeying through the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, known as the Hall of Fame or the Heroes of Faith. And I have the pleasure of continuing on the story that Reverend Sophia started last week on the life of Moses. Next week, it's more continuation, so I have a hard situation to not go too far back and not too far ahead, so I'm going to try to stay within the constraints of my verses. So journey with me, if you will, to Hebrews 11, verses 24 through 26. And I'll be reading from the New Living Translation. And it reads, "It was by faith that Moses, when he grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to share the oppression of God's people instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin. He thought it was better to suffer for the sake of Christ than to own the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking ahead to his great reward." Now, initially, my first thought of this was I didn't necessarily agree with it. I don't know if you know the story of Moses, but for me, I was like, no, he didn't just make this choice to choose oppression over, the palace. He killed somebody, and Pharaoh was after him, so to me, he had no choice but to leave this palace. So I'm glad it's not my interpretation that you are getting today. I'm going to tell you what God has to say through me about this text, because I would have left you at that. Have you ever done something bad for a good reason? Almost everybody, huh? Well, just a friendly reminder, don't be a person that means well, but does something stupid that would cause the problems to be more. Because usually that's what happens. We act out of our heat of the moment thoughts, and then sometimes it creates more problems than solutions that we think is going to happen. How many of you been rejected by your own kind? Dave, you seem like you been there. Does it cause you to shut down and run away, or does it somehow inspire you to do something better? Exactly. I don't think anybody who's dealt with rejection somehow gets some jolt of inspiration. Rejection and abandonment brings layers of pain, and sometimes it takes years to heal from. In order to understand this story of why Moses even made the heroes of faith, you have to understand that this pivotal moment meant for him. And just a side note, I don't know what Pastor Tracy's problem is. This is my second sermon dealing with a murderer, so I don't know if she's sending me a subliminal message or if you get nothing else, please control your anger. Maybe she thinks I have anger issues. I don't know. So says she got the baby, in the killing type of sermons, and I got all the murderers. So maybe you own us something. But in order to understand this, we have to move backwards in the story of Exodus. Like we journeyed last week, I'm going to kind of pick up from where Reverend Sophia left off. But like I said, I'm going to dab a little bit into Pharaoh's daughter, because for you to understand Moses' identity and why he wanted to reject this idea of being the son of Pharaoh's daughter, I want to kind of at least give her credit for just what she did, because it's just as important in her identity as Moses' identity. So Pharaoh's daughter did a courageous and passionate thing. She kind of went against what her father wanted to save Moses. She took a chance on him, and she knew that her father said that, hey, every Hebrew boy would be thrown into the river. And she's out and she sees this baby and she says, hey, this is a Hebrew boy. So it's not like she didn't know, and not like she, there was just Egyptian babies floating around that she mistaken. I mean, she knew. So knowing this, she still made a choice. And I don't know if it's a divine moment where God strikes something in her to say, hey, this is a moment for you. Or what was in that moment for her, but she made a choice in that moment to say, instead of throwing this baby back and then calling her dad and saying, hey, guess what good deed I did today? Which she could have did, but she made a choice. And instead she does something so miraculous. She sends him back to his mother. And what even more that was profound to me is this lady gives this lady child support for raising her own child. It's like the first story in the Bible of child support. She literally pays this lady to raise her own child and then brings him back and raises him as her own. Only God can do such a thing. And of all the people that could have gotten her baby, the Pharaoh's daughter of all people, only God could have done it. And then it kind of blew my mind with Pharaoh. I'm like, how did that conversation even go about? All of a sudden you have a baby. All of a sudden you have a baby, and clearly he bought into it because everybody then knows him as the Prince of Egypt. So everything that Pharaoh had, he bestowed upon Moses. And Moses' name meant the baby that was drawn from the water. So every time she called his name, you are literally saying the baby that I took from the water. Unless Pharaoh is mind swiped, how can he not know that this is one of the babies that he decreed to get rid of? So yet another divine moment where, for whatever reason, he accepts what his daughter has done and allows her to raise Moses and bestows everything that he has onto Moses. So Moses is born Hebrew, raised Egyptian, and he is educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. He's powerful in speech and action, and he is known as the Prince of Egypt. So life was probably good. So what would make him choose oppression? Moses refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, yet this is the very person who went against her father to help saving him. Isn't that like children? They grow up and then decide they want to disown you. They do not want to be called your son or daughter. Moses, he's a trendsetter. He's definitely a trendsetter. And that wasn't even in my notes. I just made that up. Maybe identifying as the grandson who was responsible for enslavement and brutality that he saw in his life no longer wanted to be something that he wanted to identify with. Maybe it wasn't just he didn't want to be his mother's son anymore. Maybe because he was brought up into this system, he decided one day that I want to do something about it. But you can't solve a problem when you low-key support the problem, even in silence. Innocent bystanders doing nothing are still perpetuating the problem. Imagine Moses defending a slave in the streets, but comes home and let a slave in his house feed him and bathe him. How crazy is that? So do he accept one, but as long as they're not beating him in the house, that's fine? Do you see we do the same thing? It's okay unless it's this. I can accept it until it goes this far. As long as they're not beating them to death, it's okay. I don't have to pay you your worth, but as long as you're getting minimum wage, it's okay. What a position to be in. And sometimes when you are deeply rooted in the systems, it's hard to even notice the problem until you step outside and see things from a different perspective. Even culturally, we don't even know the generational curses we pass along just because we are so deeply embedded into these systems that we identify with, even our family systems. It's okay to sweep child abuse and domestic abuse and molestation and mental and verbal abuse under the rug because it's so deeply embedded into our family and our cultural histories to hold these deep, dark secrets that we silently say nothing and turn a blind eye, and we subconsciously support them when we say and do nothing. But what if we took a stand and said, no, I refuse to let this continue to another generation? What if we too were like Moses and said, hey, in this moment, I'm going to do something about it? Are we bold enough to lose the riches and comfortability of our houses for the sake of others? Because that's what Moses did. As soon as he made this choice, that shifted his stance on what he could do. But some of us, because we are so comfortable in these systems, that we won't stand up for people because what does that mean for me? What am I going to lose if I stand up for this person? Do I lose my house? Do I lose my spouse? Do I lose my status? Do I lose my job? So how much do we hold on to what we think we're going to lose because we don't have faith that if you stand up, God will still provide? So we watch people oppressed. We watch systems of oppression and inequality go on because we're afraid to make the choice like Moses did that got him in the heroes of faith to say, hey, I'm going to do something about it. Or are we too comfortable where we are? Or does it not affect us because we don't identify with it? usually until it strikes home and it becomes you or your family members or somebody you love, it doesn't compel you to do anything. You have to be like Moses to step outside. It didn't strike Moses until he spent the day outside of the palace with his people to see this oppression in order for him to say, hey, something is going on bigger than what I thought. So in Exodus 2:11 through 14, it says, for many years when Moses had grown up, he went out to visit his people, the Hebrews, and he saw how hard they were forced to work. During his visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of his fellow Hebrews. After looking in all directions to make sure no one was watching, Moses killed the Egyptian and hid the body in the sand. The next day, when Moses went out to visit his people again, he saw two Hebrew men fighting. Why are you beating up your friend? Moses said to the one who had started the fight. The man replied, who appointed you to be our prince and judge? Are you going to kill me as you killed that Egyptian yesterday? Then Moses was afraid, thinking, everyone knows what I did. So it wasn't until Moses made this visit that this struck something in him. And until you get out of your little bubble and comfort zone, it'll never strike something in you. The difference with Moses is Moses in this moment makes a rash decision. And he looks in all directions, which let me know that this was something he didn't want anybody to see. Anytime you do something and you got to start looking around, that's an indicator that it's probably something you shouldn't be doing. So Moses waits till it's just three people that we think of in this story. It's Moses, the Egyptian, and the Hebrew. And he waits till no one is around. He kills the Egyptian. And at this moment, he's probably thinking, wow, I did something good. And this is why I also didn't agree with the earlier text. It's because it says the next day. So my assumption, since Pharaoh wasn't after him, is that Moses went back home. Or he did something. He was chilling. He was not running away in fear, thinking somebody was after him. So I don't know if Moses decided that, hey, this was just something he was going to do every day and just keep hiding, being this vigilante and just hiding these bodies until they start piling up, and which would eventually cause another problem because then they would have thought that the Hebrews were killing off the Egyptians. So the next day, he comes back and he feels like, hey, why are you guys doing this? You ever been in situations where you try to save somebody and then they turn on you like, what did they used to say back in the day? Who died and made you boss? Nobody wants you to tell us what we're doing. And then they call him out and say, hey, aren't you the guy that just killed somebody yesterday? And Moses is like, only 3 people were there. I ain't told nobody. One of them is dead. So could it be the very person that he saved went back and told his deepest secret? Imagine this moment for Moses, that somebody has exposed your deepest secret. And the reason why you even did it was for them. And the very people that you think that you are called to save is saying, we don't want you. And all we see you as is a murderer. So Moses is in this weird space where he doesn't want to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He doesn't want to be identified as an Egyptian. He don't want to be identified as this oppressor. But then the people who he assumed that would receive him, his very own, is saying, and we don't want you either. But he just did something and hid it for these very people. And now the Pharaoh, which was just your grandfather, is now out to kill you. What a moment. What a loss in identity to not know who you are, where you belong, when that is usually the number one thing that we all want. It's to belong. To know that somebody wants us, identifies with us, you're important to somebody, that somebody sees what you are called to be, and when you tell them, hey, I'm called to you, they receive you and not reject you. But that's not the case for Moses. And you also have to understand that just because you feel compelled to make a change doesn't mean that you take things into your own hands. Moses was called to be a deliverer, and he, at that moment, decided to be a judge. Even Jesus came and said, I didn't come to judge you. I came to set you free. So because Moses moved prematurely, he felt, hey, I'm called to something, but that's the importance of waiting on the Lord. You can feel compelled to do something, but that doesn't mean you just catapult into it. It's allowing God to direct your path, because it's also a part of the timing of God, which you will see later on, probably next week in the next sermon, of when the timing was actually right. So just because it may not be your timing, God can give you glimpses of who you are throughout your life. But it may not be the timing. It's like getting a prophecy and someone's declaring something over your life. I got prophecies even when I was a little girl on who I was called to be. But it wasn't until last year I was ordained. So whether it's the people before didn't recognize my calling, or whether Cornerstone was the divine place in which God meant for it to be birthed, I didn't just catapult myself out of there, because guess what would have faced me? And even without me catapulting it, I still received the rejection. I still received the rejection from the church, even when I wasn't even trying to force it. But with rejection, like we talked about earlier, it shuts you down. So if I can feel rejected, you're not going to want to be pushing forward to say, hey, I know what God has called me to be. The more somebody tell you what you aren't, the more it sticks to you. It's like all the bad stuff. I do this thing in the military called master resilience training, and it's this cognitive skill where somehow all the bad stuff sticks to us like Velcro, and all the good stuff, it's like Teflon. We throw that off so easily, but all the negative stuff people say to us, we feed it. And then we bring the confirmation bias to say, yeah, I agree with this, because now this person told me that too. And that's what happens. Everything God tells us we are, it slides off of us, because everything else is sticking to us. And we say, yeah, that's me. Oh, this person rejected me, that's me. I'm a failure. I tried out for the football team, they told me I was too slow. That sticks to me. And we carry these badges, and we go on in life, and every time somebody else rejects us, it shuts us more down. It shuts us more down. And the more God tries to say, hey, but I called you to this, it slides right off. Because we, as a society, want to be accepted so bad that we buy into even what people call us. We make that our identities. We were just talking earlier about animals, on how I can have a dog, and I had a dog and I named him Jackson, and he ran away, and I'm pretty sure right now if somebody was calling him Choo Choo, he would be answering right now. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I identified him as a new master, we take on whatever they call us. So who is our masters? Who are we allowing to call us something that we're answering to? Shame breeds insecurity, which is a doorway to deception. Therefore, whenever there is shame, there is a sense to hide parts of yourself from being seen because of the fear of not being accepted and rejected. So we become liars, putting on masks, only showing compartmentalized parts of ourselves, never revealing or understanding who we are because of the secrets we have hidden in the sands of our minds and hearts. You can never fully walk in your identity, hiding parts of yourself, especially the parts tied to guilt and shame. God still chose Moses, even as being a murderer. Sometimes people put these labels on us and we hold that. And sometimes even when people aren't calling it, we bring it back up for ourselves because it's attached to that guilt and shame. But even God didn't see that as a disqualification for who he called him to be. But the very people who saw that, that's all they saw. And that's what they labeled him as. People label you and disqualify you, and God still calls you. Not to get ahead too far into next week's lessons, but when Moses runs, he ends up at a well. And what's interesting about this is when people are running, they eventually become thirsty and they need something to drink. And the Lord is always providing us what we need. And just like the woman at the well, he's not offering a drink for a day. He's offering a drink for a lifetime. And just like the woman at the well, he didn't condemn her. He confronted her with her identity. So God brings us to places and reveals to us our true identity and who he called us to be, who we really are, to embrace that and to drink and to never thirst again. And we too are wells. Wells are open vessels where water can be dug out of to be a place where those who are thirsty can draw from us and be refilled to complete the race that is before them. But if we hold on to these dark secrets and these deep spaces where every time we continue to say, hey, I'm not good enough, we continue to shut ourselves down that we can't be wells for other people. The principle of a well is that what takes years to dig, it only takes moments to pour. That's the power that we have. What you're receiving right now is God digging out of me for years and years, and it's only taking moments for you to receive. That's what we're called to be. One man gets a handle on his identity and frees a whole group of people. Do you know what will happen if all of us was to gain a hold of our identity? How it could change a nation if only we held on to who God really said we are. One other thing that came to me last night was how we always have this faith in God that he can do exceedingly abundantly all that we can ask or think. And we believe so much in his identity. But when it comes to us, that's the very thing that we say, God, you can't do. You can't use me. Why would you use me? But we believe him to do everything else and for everybody else. But when it comes to us, because we so don't know ourselves, we minimize so much, and it's like our identity is like some type of toy that we constantly play with. That at one minute we're like, yeah, I can be who you said I can be, and the moment a circumstance come up, we put it back on the shelf. And we leave it there and forget who God called us to be. Then one day, we pick it back up, we get inspired and say, yeah, I remember you said I can do this. Then something else comes up. Life start lifing. And you say, oh, not for me. You can't do this for me. You can't show up for me. You can call everybody else but me. I got deep, dark secrets. I hear the person in the saying, you can't use me, and God is saying, but I still can use a murderer. We limit ourselves, not God. We limit ourselves because we are afraid to be who God called us to be. Why are you so afraid to become you? Maybe you're not a Moses. Maybe you're not called to thousands of people. But what if the only thing you're called to do is be authentically you, and you don't even want to do it? You can't even see you because of the years of holding on to your past. The things that you hid are so much deeply rooted into the sand that, baby, that sand is blowing. And all that you done dug in these sands, it's exposed. God sees it, and he still wants you. It's us who uses even those hidden things and say, God, you don't supposed to use this type of people, do you? But that's your testimony. That's how we read in the Bible. Testimonies of people that shouldn't have been used. None of these people are perfect. We read every Sunday people who are, have you been in the Heroes of Faith? Like, none of these people should really be in the, like, taking each other's birthrights, like crazy stories, and God still blessed them. He still used them. He still called them to nations. And we think because we did one thing, you somehow disqualified. Like he stopped accepting people because of you. I don't want to sound mean, but you're not that special. For God to stop being God and forget why he even created you, because you don't want to see who you are. The issue is not God rejection you. The reality is you reject yourself. Because it really don't matter what nobody else call you. It didn't change people calling me Saundra. I still was whoever I was hiding. I still was me at my core, regardless of who you call me. I'm still me, whether you identify with me as your friend, as your spouse, as your daughter, whoever. I don't change. Who God has called me don't change because of a label or a title. But sometimes those titles become so much for some of y'all, that's all you see. And the moment one of those titles is wiped away, you put your identity in those titles. That you don't even know you without that title. We gotta get a hold of our identity. And as I wrote this, I heard this in the voice of God. And I know this can be tricky for people, but I want to submit to you this blessing that I so heard God speak for us today. About telling us who he says he is. And I don't want to read it from the perspective of me telling you. How I heard it was from the voice of God. So I'm going to read it from the voice of God. So that's why I submit this to you from that voice. And you can take it however you see fit. So just a precursor. I'm not telling you this is what God said to you. I'm submitting this to you. And I'm only reading it from that voice because that's how I heard it. So in this moment, I want you to stand, if you will. If you don't want to, you can still be seated, but It's this thing I used to do when I always wanted to give my mom a gift when I was little. I would say, hey, mommy, close your eyes and open your hands because it's something I want to give to you. And that's why I hear God saying, close your eyes and open your hands because there's a gift I want to give to you. You have been bought with a price and adopted as my child. And because you belong to me, I know everything there is to know about you. I am so intimately aware of you. I knew you and saw who I created you to be before I formed you in your mother's womb. Carefully, skillfully, I shaped you from nothing to something before you even saw the light of day. Every single moment I am thinking of you. You have access to my wisdom, for you are reconciled in me. You are not condemned by me, for you have been justified. You are completely forgiven and tenderly loved. You are free from any condemning charges. You can approach me with boldness, freedom, and confidence. You have been complete in me. You are a sweet fragrance to me. You are a royal priesthood. You are firmly rooted and built in me. You have the mind of Christ. You are a temple in which I choose to dwell. You are blameless and beyond reproach. You are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. You are chosen by me to bear fruit. My desires toward you are more than the grains of sand on every shore. I read your mind like an open book, and I know all the words you're about to speak before you even start a sentence. I know every step you would take before your journey even begins. I have gone into your future to prepare the way, and in kindness I follow behind you to spare you from the harm of your past. Wherever you go, my hand will guide you, and my strength will empower you. I have laid my hand on you. If you ask what you can do or where you can go to run from me, the answer is nothing and nowhere. Nothing, and I mean nothing, can separate my love for you. No one can pluck you out of my hand. I have no reason to lie to you. Everything that I say is true. Before I laid the foundations of the earth, I had you in mind. I settled on you as the focus of my love, to be made whole and holy by my love. You are free to enter into this celebration of lavish gift given by the hand of Jesus. You are joint heirs with your brother, and you share in his inheritance. I thought of everything and provided everything you could possibly need for life and godliness. It is in me you find out who you are and what you are living for. Long before you even heard of me, I had my eyes on you. Your life is a part of the overall purpose I am working out in this marvelous plan that I took such delight in making. You are a wonderful gift of salvation that has been given to you through the truth when you believe. This precious gift is a reminder that you will get everything I have planned for you. You have direct access to me, to commune with me, to be in relation with me, to be intertwined in the vine with me, I and you and me. All things work together for your good because you love me and are called for my purpose. You have been established, anointed, and sealed by me. You can be confident in this very thing, that the good work I started in you, I will be faithful to bring it all the way to completion. You can do all things because I will give you strength. I will give you the desires of your heart, even your desires to be seen, to be loved, to be accepted and not rejected. I am for you and not against you. You are who I say you are. May my words resound in your ears like clinging cymbals, louder than the lies spoken over you, that cling to your heart like cling wrap, deeply embedded in your life, becoming the DNA evolving into your identity. Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. So let the language of heaven be birthed in your hearts today. the revelation of who you are in me. May the places in your hearts that have gone unhealed be healed today. Every broken mental space, every broken emotional space, for those who are running from callings and assignments because of hurts and misunderstanding and rejection, for those who are raised differently and those who are raised in not the ideal way, may you see that the hand of the Lord has been with you as I was with Moses on his journey. May you understand that you don't have to be understood to be called. I have chosen and called you. I come against the lack of confidence. You are who you are because I have called you. Today I am doing a new work in your heart. I am faithful, so put your hope and faith in me. So may you walk in alignment with faith and your identity. In Jesus' name.